Whoa! Busted play. All right, this is the Busted Play podcast. I'm Dylan Marsh, joined with Faceless Wonder producer Zach. JD and Garrett Factor are not here today, but we're going to do the show anyway. And let's go ahead and get started talking about the biggest news story of the week. And, of course, we finally found out who's playing in Super Bowl 51 as we have the Falcons going up against the New England Patriots. Almost said New Orleans. That's what I get for being from Louisiana. But no prediction. No, none of that stuff today, talking about the Super Bowl. What I'm going to talk about is my three advantages for both teams going up against each other. First I'm going to go ahead and talk about the conference championship games that we had this past week, and both extreme blowouts. Both the Green Bay Packers and the New Orleans. Why am I saying New Orleans? Producer Zach, why am I saying New Orleans? I don't even like the Saints.
Probably because you're so hyped up about the Pelicans beating the Cavs.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. Well, we have an NBA podcast coming up. After this one, we'll be recording that. But, yeah, I'm very excited about that. But, no, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Green Bay Packers both played like complete crap this past weekend. Let's go ahead and talk about the Falcons-Packers. The Falcons beat the Packers 44-21. And if this says anything about how the Green Bay Packers played, I know that they don't have a running back besides Repowski at the fullback position, but Aaron Rodgers led the whole game. Even had more rushing yards than the Falcons did with 46 yards. He was a leading rusher in that game with 4 carries. But the Falcons completely dismantled the Packers and really just stopped their momentum in the tracks. And the Packers looked lost. Zach, don't you agree that the Packers looked completely lost out there on Sunday?
Yeah, but I was telling you or somebody that it wasn't really that big of a surprise to me that they lost because they have a lot of injuries on their team and they've been injured. Like Luke was telling me that Clay Matthews had like a separated shoulder or something.
Yeah, they were definitely
so they're
ridden with injuries. Up. But the Falcons' game to play. Julio Jones, 9 receptions, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns Sunday. Matt Ryan, almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the offense was clicking. The offense really looked really good. And I have a feeling we all know what the Patriots bring to the table. We really do. They went up against the Steelers, and Tom Brady did his Tom Brady usual stuff. You know, they sat there and, LeGarrette Blount got the first downs that they needed to keep the drive alive. And with the Patriots, you're just going to get Tom Brady throwing the ball 40 times in a game. And in this Super Bowl, I think this is going to be – I've had debates with JD, with people in my family, even just some friends of mine, that some people think it's going to be a shootout. Some people think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. And, again, in the Super Bowl, you never know. You can never tell in the Super Bowl. But I think you get these two prolific offenses on the field, and you have Tom Brady, probably the greatest of all time, going up against Matt Ryan, who is now finally in a place for him to win a Super Bowl, and deservingly so. And, I'll get to their advantages here in a second, but with the Patriots beating the Steelers 36-17, and I will say this, though. I would say the Falcons proved that they were so much better than the Packers because the Packers had so many injuries. But I would go ahead and say that the Steelers just didn't come prepared. Because, all right, Zach, do you remember the flea flicker Tom Brady threw against the Steelers? They've ran that play twice this year already. And the Steelers bid on that so bad that Chris Hogan was wide open for that touchdown. And it just seemed like the Steelers just did not come to play. Ben Roethlisberger was extremely inaccurate. He looked rattled from the start. Receivers couldn't catch the football. Same thing with the Packers. They couldn't catch wide open passes. It was drop balls. But I just think that the Falcons proved that they had a better game than the Patriots. Don't get me wrong. Tom Brady, 384, 3 touchdowns, and only 10 incompletions. And then LeGarrette Blount, 47 yards, basically doing a New England Patriot running back like they always do. Just get the first downs and then goal line, score touchdowns. But, Zach, you seemed really intrigued by this. I'm not calling you the Faceless Wonder anymore because you have a camera on you now, so the fans might get to see the Faceless Wonder, Zach, for the first time in about, 2 months, I think it's been. So maybe even 3 or 4 months. I really don't even know how long it's been since you've joined us, Zach. I don't know, man. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. But this Chris Hogan story. Chris Hogan, a four-year lacrosse player at Penn State, then plays 1 year football at Monmouth, however you pronounce it. And he only had 14 catches in his college career and I think like 2 or 3 touchdowns. And then he goes to the NFL because he's so athletic. He goes to the combine or whatever. People, he gets undrafted. Then he gets picked up by the Bills, gets cut by the Bills, and now he's playing with the Patriots. And now this weekend, he set the all-time record for receiving yards in a playoff game for the Patriots. So I guess you can say he
was actually cut by 4 NFL teams.
Oh, really? Who were they?
I don't know. I just was looking at the thing on Instagram earlier.
Was one of them the Dolphins?
I don't know. I know one of them was the Bills, but it said that it was.
But the Bills were the last
up.
team he played for. Yeah, go ahead, look it up. But see, this is a system to where you can fit anyone in as long as they can catch a football. You have Tom Brady throwing the football, and you don't have difficult plays. You just have these simple, short pass routes. And if you don't have someone like a Randy Moss, you're not going to throw the ball downfield. You don't need to. You just drive the ball downfield, take time off the clock, and that's how the Patriots win football games. They do have big playmakers like Julian Edelman or Gronk whenever he's healthy, or even Martellus Bennett right now. That those, I think that's the biggest playmaker they have with a deep ball threat, or at least in the red zone. But this is just a system to where you can put any receiver in, and they're probably going to succeed. And I see that with Chris Hogan. I would not be shocked if he becomes a big-time name for the Patriots to join Amendola and Edelman as the three-headed monster that they have. All right, Zach, you got the names of the teams that cut Chris Hogan and maybe have missed out on the greatest wide receiver that has ever lived.
That's a little far.
Oh,
but,
yeah. You're right.
The 49ers, the Giants, and the Dolphins and the Bills. He played for the Bills the longest.
How long did he play for the Bills?
From 2012 to 15.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, so let me go ahead and get to my 3 advantages for each team going into Super Bowl 51 in Houston. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the New England Patriots because they're a 3-point favorite right now in Vegas. But I would say, first off, of course, one advantage for New England is definitely coaching. I'm not talking about coordinators. I'm just talking about Bill Belichick. Because I wouldn't be too, I would go ahead and say that Bill Belichick could be one of the greatest of all time. One of the greatest coaches, definitely implements discipline in his organization, gives people second chances, and guess what? A lot of people get second chances. They definitely do not do anything else. The discipline inside New England's organization is amazing. And one thing that sticks out for me, that even with the Steelers, it was amazing. The Steelers and Patriots were a huge – it was a big-time stat for me because at halftime, there was not one single penalty in the first 2 quarters of that game, which I thought was extremely impressive. And that shows the discipline that the New England Patriots have. And okay, the second advantage for New England, definitely the depth at the wide receiver position. Yeah, the Falcons have Julio Jones, and he has proven all season long that he is the best receiver in the NFL. Zach, do you agree with that?
I was not listening.
Wow. You're not even doing your job.
I was just...
Zach, do you think Julio Jones is the best receiver in the NFL?
No.
Wow. Who do you think is?
Antonio Brown.
False. All right, but
At least
but you have these 3 reliable receivers at the wide receiver position with Edelman, Amendola, but then also you have the new up and coming riser in Chris Hogan, the lacrosse player. Wow, can't even say anything right today. But then you also have at the tight end position, you have Bennett Isn't that right? His last name's Bennett. Yeah, you got Bennett at the tight end position. Then you have Blunt, who he can catch some passes, but he really doesn't touch the ball that much. All right, but the third advantage for New England with is their pass defense, and I would say that because I'm not going to say their pass rush per se, but definitely that they have the number one pass defense in the NFL. New England gave up 6 yards per pass attempt in regular season, which was number one in the NFL. And I think that's going to be a huge factor in the Super Bowl. Patriots defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, he basically has implemented a bend but don't break defense in New England, and that basically has provided them the comfort to give up yards, but when it comes to crunch time inside the 30-yard line, that they don't give up touchdowns. And that they really just give up field goals. And I think that's going to be a huge factor for the Patriots. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the Atlanta Falcons. We've got the Dirty Birds. And the one advantage I think they have is definitely the running game with Deontay Freeman and with their new income running back, Coleman. They definitely help Matt Ryan open up the pass game. And this game is going to be – I think this is going to be a very long Super Bowl. It's going to be a lot of pass attempts going on. But running game is definitely an advantage of the Falcons. Number two, definitely is just how exceptional the offense is for the Falcons. You have a great playmaker in Julio Jones. You have Matt Ryan, who is a now experienced veteran who is starting to show his true potential. He's starting to become the quarterback that a lot of people thought he would be. But one stat that the offense of Atlanta has shown me is that they scored 540 points in the regular season, which is 8th all time for points scored in the regular season. And Kyle Shanahan, their offensive coordinator, probably the best coordinator in the league. But people are saying he's going to go take the 49ers job, but whatever. This is a Super Bowl, and that's what people care about right now. And I think the Kyle Shanahan, Josh McDaniels matchup is going to be very interesting. It's going to be like a little chess match to see who can keep up with who, because I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. All right, and the third and final advantage for the Falcons, definitely the pass rush. They had the league leader in sacks in Vic Beasley with 15.5 sacks this year. And as we saw these past couple of years, or every time you see that the Patriots lose in the playoffs, especially last year when the Patriots lost to the Broncos, Brady was sacked 4 times and hit 17 times. So getting a good pass rush on Brady, making him hurry up and basically not give him all the time in the pocket that he usually has. That's how you beat the great Tom Brady. Just like any other quarterback. If you rush any quarterback, you're going to have success on the defensive side of the football. So I think you have to make Brady make plays, maybe get him out of the pocket, out of his comfort zone, and we'll see what happens right there. But those are my 3 advantages for both teams. And we got a phone call now. We have Brett Deaver from Oklahoma City, a guy I went to college with, and he actually put me on my first sports talk show he had up at our college. Brett, how's it going, dude?
Going pretty good. How about you?
Dude, doing pretty good. I'm excited for the Super Bowl. Not looking forward to the Pro Bowl, but we'll see. We'll see how this week goes. Well, first off, let me ask you this question: are you going to watch the Pro Bowl?
Honestly, I've never watched a complete Pro Bowl. I think it's more about the award for the guys. Honestly, if they never played an actual Pro Bowl and they just said, "Hey, you're a Pro Bowler," give people awards, that'd be fine with me. But it's all about, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars, and they can earn more millions of dollars, and you really don't want to put yourself, in harm's way in a game that means absolutely nothing.
All right, Brett. If I get this wrong, correct me. But you were a Packer fan, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am a Packers fan.
Yeah, I remember you walking around with Aaron Rodgers jersey on all the time, or T-shirt jersey. So, yeah, I just want to make sure I got that right. But that's good. I want to hear from a Packer fan. What do you think about last weekend? Like, what do you think went wrong with the Packers and the way that, I know that the Packers were completely injury-ridden, but, just they seemed like the momentum just stopped right as soon as the game started.
Well, they definitely have had, a pretty banged-up year. I mean, they've had everybody pretty much except for Aaron Rodgers in and out of the lineup. And that defense, I mean, if that defense made it past Atlanta and went to the Super Bowl, they were going to get torched, by the Patriots. But a lot of it has to do with, as they were going on that streak, and they talked about it in the broadcast, was they forced a ton of turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was in that game, the Packers just kind of started off really slow. They had some turnovers. They couldn't really get things going. And the Falcons are the type of offense that they're not going to make mistakes. They're going to score pretty much every time they have the ball.
Yeah, well, a couple of questions that, I was thinking these past couple of days and some things I actually heard on some shows I watched this week. But one thing I heard that really intrigued me was, do you think that the Packers need to start rebuilding around them, or do you think that this was just a fluke season with so many injuries on both sides of the football?
Well, I think every team, should take the idea of we can't be happy with what we've got. Unless you win the Super Bowl, you can't be happy with the team that you have out there on the field because it wasn't good enough. So, and it showed because Carolina Panthers last year, they were in the Super Bowl. This year they were awful. And I think the Packers should take a similar kind of point of view and start looking at, hey, who needs to be on this team still and who needs to be gone. But I don't think this is a rebuilding year because you have Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers isn't going to want to be playing for last place or wanting to play for that number 1 overall pick. Aaron Rodgers wants to be playing for Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And as long as he's on the team, you've got to put together a team that's going to at least try and keep up with Rodgers. Now, obviously, this team this year did not keep up with him. And, Rodgers had to literally carry that entire team throughout, the majority of the season.
Yeah, and definitely. What they start off 4-6?
Yeah, I think they were 4-2 or 3-2 when they met the Cowboys, and then they went on that 4-game losing streak, and it looked like the world was falling apart.
Yeah, especially that loss against the Vikings in the second game of the season. That really just that really seemed to be what started that little fall. But then then they ended up losing 4 in a row, starting with the Falcons and then the Colts, Titans, and the Redskins, getting blown out by the Redskins, and then just seemed to click. Aaron Rodgers started doing Aaron Rodgers things. Started beat the Eagles, then the Texans, and then destroyed the Seahawks. And I think that's what solidified that the Packers, they could still make the playoffs. Just they'd have to run the table, and that's exactly what Aaron Rodgers said they could do. And they got in, and I would definitely say that this was an impressive year for the Packers, not in their history, but just the fact that how they started off and then really made their way to the NFC Championship. But down here in Northwest Louisiana, we have a lot of Cowboy fans up here, and I would not be surprised if everyone also thinks this, but I think that Cowboy-Packer game was one of the best games I've seen, not officiating-wise, just the excitement of the game. Would you agree with that?
I think the second half for sure was. But that first half, honestly, I thought Green Bay was going to run away with it.
Oh, definitely.
And as somebody who's grown up in Dallas, I appreciate the Cowboys. When they're the team that's always on, you kind of have to sit down and watch.
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt all season long that it's like you're doing good, you've got a lot of talent, but you're just not there yet. And, I think it kind of showed when they played Green Bay that they still got some pieces, they still need some more pieces, and they got to get ready for, if they play Atlanta or teams that honestly are better and healthier than the Packers were this postseason.
Yeah. And see, where we're doing this podcast from in Shreveport is the area that Dak Prescott is around, where he's from. So it's, Cowboys became a really big deal this year around here. Usually it's, I'd say 70% Saints, 30% Cowboys around this area. But now it seems like the Saints fans are now Cowboy supporters, which was no one even saw that coming. But the fact that the Cowboys, okay, the way you see the Cowboys and how they're coming up with all this talent, do you think that it's going to be another basically history repeats itself where the Packers and the Cowboys are the two best teams in NFC, and they're going to duke it out every year?
Well, I think we got a lot to see in this next year, and especially, the rookie campaigns of Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott were absolutely fantastic. And watching them every week was so much fun because you were just like, how are these guys so good at this young of an age? Only in their first season they're doing so good. But I do think that Cowboys offense is going to be something to be reckoned with. I do think, though, they've got, and I looked at it the other day, I looked at a bunch of their free agents, and they have a good portion of their defense is hitting free agency. And so they've got to definitely retool. But their offense can compete with anybody. It's their defense that at times was like, you're getting away with a little bit of, your defense is getting away with, we're not that good, but our team is keeping us, our offense is keeping us in the game.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt like it was the offense is gonna score, so we can give up a little bit, and it definitely didn't have that pressure to have to, keep the other team from scoring or basically feel like the game was in their hands. I think that's why the Cowboys did so well this year, the defense, or at least it looked like they did so well. But let's go on. And I'll ask, before you go, I want to ask this question about there still rumors are starting to grow now about Tony Romo getting traded to the Denver Broncos. What do you think? Do you think that's a good idea, or should they just go ahead and try to stick with Trevor Siemian until they find a next big thing?
Well, I think in theory, Tony Romo coming in gives them, maybe 2 to 3 years of you've got a pretty decent level quarterback who's done it. We've seen him do it at a high level, who just needs to be protected.
Yeah.
But realistically, I've looked at it. I've heard a lot from Dallas Cowboys insiders, and it just doesn't make sense for Denver because it's going to be expensive. Giving up for this guy, you're going to have to. The Cowboys aren't going to want, give us your 7th-round pick. They want something worthwhile. And the Broncos, you have to give up draft picks for a guy that honestly has not been healthy most of his career. A guy that's a really good quarterback and probably still has a little bit left in the tank. But who do you give up for it, and how do you take on that salary cap number? And that's the big thing right now is Tony Romo's getting paid like a top-level starting quarterback.
Yeah.
And you can't move those contracts very easily. And I don't know how the Cowboys will if they do move him this year.
Yeah, I don't see how they're going to be able to move him because of that $100 million contract that he signed a couple of years ago. But I definitely see I don't see Jerry Jones saying he's okay with it. I see more along the lines that the GM and the president of the Cowboys basically make the call that to release Tony Romo, to basically let anybody go after him if they really want him, because I don't see suitable trade partners for them unless it's the 49ers or just someone who's really desperate for a quarterback that has experience, or maybe even Cleveland in that fact. But did you hear the comments that Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney said talking about the Cleveland Browns, since we brought them up, about if they passed on Deshaun Watson?
I just saw those just a couple hours ago. If I'm a Cleveland Browns fan right now, you're just kind of hoping that, eventually they right the ship.
Yeah.
I do think Deshaun Watson is going to be somewhat of a good quarterback. I mean, I see Watson, my personal grade on him, I think he's good. I think he's more I think he'd be more well-suited to be drafted in like a 4th-round pick, like Prescott was this year.
Yeah.
Kind of one of those guys that has some talent, but, on a bigger scale, you're kind of like, I still have my questions about, what he can do.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Dak Prescott, now looks like he should have been a 1st-round pick.
Yeah, he was a diamond. He was a diamond in the dirt for sure. Basically, no one saw him coming, which, he led Mississippi State. Again, I'm going to repeat that, college, Mississippi State, to a number 1 ranking. and which that's hard to do. And that was basically a team led by a bunch of seniors, but the way Dak Prescott played against LSU and Alabama and all those SEC schools, it's just you don't see a quarterback like that all the time. And I think really what it was the downfall of the last couple of, I think it was like the last 4 games of his senior year or his junior year when they were number 1, and then his senior year that they never got past like number 15. So I think it's along the fact that he didn't play for a really big school that he wasn't drafted number 1. But then also, this is a guy who had one D1 scholarship his senior year, and then after they made a run to the semifinals and lost in one of the best high school football games I've ever seen. Then he went to, I think, TCU football camp and finally got offers from LSU, and I think I want to say TCU offered him, and a bunch of other big-time Big 12 and SEC schools, but he stuck with Mississippi State because they wanted him since he was a sophomore. So I think that shows something about the character of Dak Prescott as well. But definitely, but when Dabo Swinney says that passing on Deshaun Watson is like passing on Michael Jordan, I think that's kind of a little bit of an asinine comment, because when you sit there and say that you're passing on the greatest player to ever play this sport before he's even played a down in the professional league, and if you look at his stats, that Deshaun Watson's thrown over 30 interceptions in his college career, and he is he's not playing in a Senior Bowl. The Browns asked him to play in a Senior Bowl, and he was just like, no, I'm not going to play in the Senior Bowl. And I don't see why you would or wouldn't. I think it's just a decision, and I think it's because he's definitely got a lot of draft stock in him already. But before I get any further into that MJ comment, what do you think about him declining to play in the Senior Bowl, even after the number 1 overall pick asked him to play in it?
Well, I think first of all, it's this new brand of people are starting to think about injury. Used to be people played and they just played because they loved the sport and they didn't care about if I get hurt and I'm never able to play the game again. That's fine because I got to play as long as I did. But people are taking, definitely all across our culture, are taking their personal health very, very seriously. And you saw it with Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette not playing in their bowls. You've seen it, you've seen it play out on a bad end with guys like Sam Bradford, Marcus Lattimore, some guys who were really talented and took some injuries, in games that honestly didn't mean a whole lot. And so you kind of have to think about it, from a health standpoint, because you've got football players now that are in their 50s and 60s that are saying, I'm, having really bad effects from injuries that I took in games where I really shouldn't have been playing. And so I think Watson's idea is, I want to stay healthy. I don't want to blow a chance and get hurt or anything like that, because, honestly, the Senior Bowl, at this point, people have a pretty good idea of where they're going to pick you. People have a pretty good idea of what kind of player you are, stuff like that. And so the Senior Bowl and as well as the Combine, I don't think has as much stock as people think it does. I think people can move up, if they've not looked good for a lot of the season. But I don't think, as Deshaun Watson, he's probably one of the top 2 quarterbacks that are going to be drafted this year. I don't think he's got any reason to get in there, because what's he going to show? He's already, won a national championship.
He's already beaten a defense that's basically an NFL defense already.
Oh yeah, well, and he's been in 2 straight national championships. I mean, this is a guy that now. Is it about him? Is it about that team? Is it about the coach? We don't know. I mean, definitely Deshaun Watson made that team better. But the real question is, is that going to translate into the NFL? And I kind of see him as being kind of like Andrew Luck. Highly touted, really good player, type of guy that kind of throws some interceptions in bad timings. I mean, Andrew Luck, was close to leading the NFL in interceptions as a rookie. And, that's kind of how I see Watson, kind of like Luck, as a guy that's good, but kind of puts more trust in his arm than he should and takes some risks that sometimes work out, but sometimes, you got to pick it. So you've got, 3 picks in a game.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Brett, before I let you go, where do you think Watson will get drafted? You think he's a easy top 10 first rounder?
If I am a GM, I'm not drafting him in the first round just because of that question mark of, can he make, good decisions, stuff like that. But I do see somebody's going to need a quarterback. And that's the thing. These guys, NFL teams will make decisions based on what they need. Cleveland needs a quarterback. But honestly, drafting a quarterback with the first overall pick, you're looking at an offensive line that's not that good, an offense that kind of failed them. So you're kind of setting up, if you draft Watson number 1 overall, you're setting him up for failure.
Yeah.
So
I think,
that's what I see.
I really like your comment the one you just said about the whole offensive line is setting them up for failure. I think that's been any quarterback that goes in there with RG3 and to Johnny Manziel and to Brandon Weeden and Brian Hoyer, just any quarterback in the past 6 years has basically been set up for failure. All right, Brett, dude, I really enjoyed it, dude. I appreciate you calling in.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man, I'll talk to you later.
All righty, have a good one.
So with this whole Dabo Swinney saying Deshaun Watson is basically the next Michael Jordan in the NFL, Zach, let me ask you, what do you think about that? You going to show people your faces?
No.
No, okay. One day.
Probably not. I don't know. I like you just said, Michael Jordan was the greatest person to play basketball, other than maybe LeBron James. We're not gonna get into that right now. But I don't see Deshaun Watson going down as a Brett Favre. I don't see Deshaun Watson going down as a Peyton Manning. I mean, I could see him. I don't see him being that great in the NFL.
But what is that? All right, let me put this scenario in front of you. What if the Browns asked Deshaun Watson, "Hey, playing the Senior Bowl," and he's like, "No." And the reason the Browns wanted him to really play in the Senior Bowl is because the Browns coaching staff are the coaches coaching the Senior Bowl. So it would basically give them an in-depth look at Deshaun Watson for the number 1 overall pick. And I wouldn't be shocked, like what Brett just said. It could just be a huge setup for failure. And that's starting to become a noticeable trend for the Browns. And what if he's really not trying to, I'm not saying not get drafted number 1 overall because you get the most money. But it's more along the facts of he doesn't want to play for the Browns because the quarterbacks that play for Browns are always injured. They always just end up as having terrible careers. And what if, Dabo Swinney, head coach for Clemson, might definitely be like, okay, come on, pick him. He's a national champion, 2-time national championship appearance quarterback, 2-time Heisman finalist runner-up. How can you not take him number 1 overall? This guy's going to be great. But then you also got to remember that the transition from NCAA to NFL is completely and utterly stupidly different. It's like playing in a grown men's flag football where you have no pass rushers and then going straight into the NFL. Like I have a feeling that's probably what it's like to these NFL players, like to these college players. Like the speed is so much different, and it takes years to get used to if you're a quarterback, and your decision making's got to be probably a second or 2 faster. And I just don't see how how a rookie quarterback like Dak Prescott could come in and have such a great year like he did. And I think that's because he had the protection he needed. And if you bring a quarterback like Deshaun Watson into that offensive line, it's going to be insane. This is what I think. I'm no GM. I'm an idiot. I'm just a guy who gets paid to talk sports. But if I were the Browns, I'd focus on getting that offensive line built up. I would do what the Cowboys did. The Cowboys wasted 3 years in the draft drafting offensive linemen. And look where they are now. They found the 4 or 5 perfect offensive linemen to where they're going to have the best offensive linemen for the next 2-3 years. And that definitely means a Super Bowl run. And everything starts from the offensive line. I don't care if you say the quarterback's the most important position. It is, but it all starts from wherever the ball starts, and that's the center. And that goes the whole offensive line to where basically you need the protection to get the ball off. You need the holes for your running back to get through, and that's exactly what the Dallas Cowboys had. That's exactly what New England has. And they are not shy about drafting offensive linemen because there are offensive linemen out the butt coming in these drafts. There aren't quarterbacks, though. But if you just get a quarterback like, I would even say like a Brock Osweiler. Y'all know how I feel about Brock Osweiler. I hate that guy. I think he is a waste of $72 million. But if you get just a decent offensive line and a Brock Osweiler, you're easily a team that contends for the playoffs every year.
I mean, you saw him with the Broncos.
Yeah, with the Broncos, he was great.
Yeah.
Because they had a great offensive line. And then you see him with the Texans, a mediocre offensive line, and guess what? It goes down a lot. And that shows a lot about Tom Brady as well, though. Yeah, Tom Brady is one of the greatest to ever play the game, but that's because of the way he prepares. And same with Peyton Manning. The way he prepares for games, his decision-making, his poise on the field, the way he leads a team, and just his presence on the field makes a huge difference. But it all starts with the offensive line. The Patriots have always had a great offense. Brady's only had one serious injury in his career, and that's when he got sacked and tore his ACL on a fluke injury, I believe. And ever since then, they've had an amazing offensive line where they make Super Bowl runs. Brady's going to his 7th Super Bowl. You can't do that with mediocre offensive line. You can't. Well, you also got to remember he's got one of the greatest coaches of all time.
If not the greatest.
Yeah, if not the greatest, correct. And when you put that in consideration, it's like, what are the Browns trying to do? Yeah, yes, the quarterback is the most important position, but you can have success with a mediocre quarterback for at least for a while. You're not going to win any champion. Are the Browns seriously thinking if they draft a quarterback that all their problems are solved? No, their defense is horrendous. They got Joe Hayden at quarterback, and that's really about it. And Jamie Collins, defensive lineman, who I think is a big sign for the Browns.
Right.
I think Jamie Collins, the guy who got cut from New England because he wanted more money, which I think is hilarious. It shows again about Bill Belichick. He doesn't want players that sit there and
he got more money.
Yeah, he got more money, but he sat there and said, "I want more money." And the next day, Bill Belichick cut him from the team because he doesn't want those type of players. But I think that's a big sign for the Browns. I think that's a step forward on the pass rush, but they need to build on that. They need to build on their secondary. They need to build on their offensive line. And I think if they do that these next couple of years, the Browns will be in a winning, possibly a chance to win a division.
Right. I think this year, because it seems like these past couple of years they've drafted a new quarterback every year. It like we've just been saying, it always
like
seems
Cody Kessler in this one. It wasn't a first-round draft pick.
And it always just seems that it never works out.
Yeah.
I just think that this year, like you were saying, they need to, either do offensive linemen or at least work on their defense. I mean, who knows? It just because their defense is pretty god-awful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're god-awful.
And to the people who are saying that Tony Romo needs to go to Cleveland,
Tony Romo would get hurt even more.
If you think Tony Romo would do even remotely good in Cleveland, take the scenario of RG3. RG3 had a busted-up leg. A second year in the league, I believe, in the playoffs. Well, before the playoffs, he tore his ACL. Or like slightly tore it or whatever. And he goes into the playoffs and tries to play on it with a brace, and it completely shreds it. And he's not the same player since. And the Browns are like, okay, let's get RG3. Let's get this guy. Let's give him a chance. We think he can definitely change our scheme.
Well, if they had a better offensive line.
But, again, the offensive line did not protect him, and he got hurt in the first week of the season.
Literally the best
and was
offensive
out
lineman
until
they have.
week 15.
Literally the best offensive lineman they have is Joe Thomas.
And he's probably the best offensive lineman in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no one else that's even there to help him.
Right.
And it's just one of those fiascos to where it's like the Browns, they definitely just need to make changes in the front office. Or they just need to get their head out of their butt. Because if they're focusing on offense, then that's not going to do anything except win you a game a year. You know, you went up against their only win this year was against the San Diego Chargers, probably the third worst team in the league.
Yeah.
And the Chargers basically had probably given up on the season.
Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm sorry, the Los Angeles Chargers now. But I think they really just wanting a good draft pick. And I called that their only win of the season would be against the Chargers on Christmas Eve.
And what's funny about it is what they would have lost to was just off of a fluke botched field goal.
Yes, and the field goal was that was insane. I'm not gonna lie, I was very happy that the Browns finally won a football game.
Yeah.
But Cleveland, come on. LeBron is so disappointed in you. How can you let down LeBron?
Hey, put LeBron at quarterback and get Kyle Korver as a
If you want to hear some more about LeBron, go ahead and look at our NBA podcast we're about to put up. But this podcast is over with. This is the Busted Play podcast. I'm Dylan Marsh. Producer Zach, thank you as always. For everyone watching, God bless.